Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about organizing ELA materials. You can grab the freebie at bit.ly/nest ELA workbook, and that will just be a quick little place for you to take notes. So today we are talking about organizing your standards, organizing your teacher materials, organizing your weekly materials. We're going to talk a little bit about lesson planning, basically just like getting a format for that. We're going to talk about organizing student materials, and then finally we're going to talk about how to organize your differentiated materials as well. So this is just a quick look at what we're going to discuss today, and we're going to dive right in. We're just going to cover little pieces of each of these things. I'm going to try to keep it right around half an hour. That's what I've been aiming for. So we're a little bit behind. We're going to try to hustle through these. The first step of getting everything organized, I would suggest, is printing all of your state standards out. So I know on the Common Core website, you can print like all the 6 domains at once. So you'll print out all of your standards for like RL, and then all of your standards for writing, all of your standards for RI. And then that will just be, if you print all those, you can keep them in your teacher binder or your teacher clipboard, whatever you use to keep all of your information together, because you're going to base all of your lessons around these things. You're going to also start pacing and creating a pacing guide based off these state standards. So this is why I think it's important to start just simply by printing all of them out, because you can start tackling them a little later on throughout the year. We're also going to talk about resource storage. So you are going to slowly collect a whole lot of resources for all of your lessons. You're going to collect centers that your kids are going to use hands-on. You're going to collect partner games that you're going to do during your mini lessons. You're going to collect graphic organizers that you're going to use for specific books or for any books. So you're going to be collecting a lot of resources over the years, or even over your first year of teaching, for all of your ELA lessons. So there's 2 ways that I suggest keeping all of your materials, and it just kind of depends on how much space you have. So I love doing the file folder route. I like doing the binder route the most. So the binder route is where you print off resources for a specific standard, and then you put them into a binder. So that's going to give you a lot of binders, because there are a lot of single standards. So this would be like a kindergarten example, and then you would just print off any work that you have within. That way, when you're lesson planning, you can quickly go in and grab that. If you don't have the bookshelf space or the cabinet space, you can always go the file folder route. It takes up a little less space. I don't have anything in here, but if you just label each file folder with a specific standard, like RL 1.2, any material that you collect for those specific standards can go into the file folder, and then that can all go in a filing cabinet or in your teacher desk, and you can just quickly grab those resources. So here is an example of the binder route. If you go the binder route, you can either split up your material by domain or by standard. It just depends on how specific you want to be. So the one I just showed you would be standard specific. So this is one specific standard. Let's see, on multiple meaning words. But the other option would be, I have these freebies that I will drop a link in just a minute. It's the picture at the bottom. I have these free binder covers that I made, I think last summer or 2 summers ago. I made these binder covers, and you can either print 8 of them and have 8 of these, and you can like maybe put it on the side that you want, or you can get one of those like 5-inch binders and put all of the standards that you have for that specific, or all of the resources you have for that specific standard or domain in the binder. So it just depends on how much content you have for each standard. If you are slowly building up your content, then You might be okay with doing the one binder for the whole domain, but if you have been collecting resources and worksheets and activities and lesson plans for a long time, you probably will want to make sure to grab the individual binders. And I am putting a link in the comments now for those free binders. So if you are interested in those free binders, go ahead and grab the freebie link now. If you do not have the space for the binders, like I was talking about, you can do the file folders. The file folders take up less space. And the file folders, actually, there is a great benefit to using the file folders, because if you cut apart, for example, I know in this binder there are centers that I have not cut apart yet. But for example, this is like a kindergarten center that I haven't prepped yet. But if you have something like that in your binders, it's probably going to be hard to store. So that's where file folders come in really handy, because you can store all of your cut apart centers and your partner games and your interactive notebook flaps in those binders, or sorry, in those file folders. So I do really appreciate the easiness of storing in that, and it does take a lot less space. It's not as pretty, of course, but if you stick a Post-it note on the front, you can just write which standard it is really quickly, and that will help when you are trying to grab real quick to look at last year's lesson plans or last year's resources. A lot of teachers are going to be using a lot more digital resources this year, and they're going to be storing a lot on Google Drive and Dropbox. I think if you have access to Dropbox when you're on your school computer, I think Dropbox is very handy, because if you have Dropbox, you can save it when you're at school, and then you can access it when you're at home as well. And then within your Dropbox, I would suggest making individualized standard folders within your digital folder. So within like your teaching folder, you might have RL units, RI units, writing units, speaking and listening units. And then within those, if you open those folders up, I would have another folder for each of the individualized standards. That way you can slowly save lesson plans, resources, anything that you gather, I would put into individualized standard folders within a Dropbox. So that would be my suggestion if you're going to not do paper saving and you're going to go with Dropbox. So you can also do Google Drive too. There's some other really handy, and I think Google has one, Google Keep maybe, but Dropbox is always what I've used. So that would be where I would go if you're going to do it digitally. Another way that you can organize your ELA materials and your ELA block is to go ahead and look once a week at the resources you're going to need for your lessons. So when you're lesson planning, go ahead and be extremely aware of every single little thing you need. And I used to grab everything I would need for the week and grab it in a bucket. And I would grab all of the books I need, all the lesson plans I need. I would go ahead and cut apart all partner games or interactive notebook pieces that the kids might have. If they're going to be working on worksheets or centers, everything that I would need, I would look on a Sunday or even Monday morning before the kids come to school, and I would put them all in a bucket so that my ELA bucket, I could quickly grab all the books for the week and any extra resources I would need. And that would just help take away from any distractions during your mini lessons. You have a very short time frame for the mini lesson, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And you just want to make sure that you're not taking away from your mini lesson time to focus on resource gathering. So prep all that. We are going to talk now about lesson planning. It is important to go ahead and kind of decide, are you going to have them paper format? Or are you going to have them digital format? If they're all digital, just have a place to hold all of those lesson plans. If you are going to print them out or write them, you can either have a book of lesson plans or you can have an ELA binder. And within that ELA binder, you can have all of your lesson plans. You can print them out or you can have them digital. Another thing to think about when creating your lesson plans is, are you going to have a team lesson plan format where everybody writes in the same, like a shared Google Doc? Or are you going to have it individualized? So that would probably be based off of what your district wants or what your principal requires. That might be something you don't have control over, but if you do have control over it, figure out if you're going to have individualized lesson plans for just your class or if you're going to go with your team. And then if you also need to figure out if they're required or not required. If you are a teacher who's a first-year teacher, or if you are moving to a new school and you don't know really the ins and outs, figure out if they are required. If they are not required, I would still suggest writing lesson plans. They can be super informal if you don't have to use them, but I do always suggest writing lesson plans so that you can be extra prepared for your content. After you get all of your lesson plans underway, you can start organizing your group work, and that's going to be the stuff that your kids are going to have their hands on once you split up into groups. So you have to figure out how you want your ELA block to run, whether you're going to do Daily 5 or Reader's Workshop. But once you figure out how you're going to group your students and how they're going to move around the classroom, you're going to have to figure out how to get their work to them. So students are going to need to know exactly where to go to find their work for, like, their skill drill table. Or the students are going to need to know exactly which books to grab when they're at Read to Someone. Or they're going to need to know where to find the materials for their writing group. So it should be very organized. It will take a couple weeks throughout the first few weeks of school. But I would suggest one thing is to have buckets for each group. So if you have like those clear shoe holders, I think they're like $1 at Dollar Tree. Sometimes they're at Target. But if you have centers or hands-on activities, you can just throw those all into a bucket so that when the kids work around the classroom in their groups and then they get to maybe their group where they're going to be practicing their foundational skills or their phonemic awareness skills, that's when they can have those hands-on manipulatives that are right in the bucket right there. They know where to find it. They know there's going to be instructions in there. They know that that's where their content is going to be. Another suggestion is if you are working with passages or worksheets, I would suggest having a folder at that table or at that group of desks, and that will hold what worksheets they're working on or what passages they're working on, so that when they get there, they can open it up, they grab their materials that they need real quick, and they don't have to interrupt you while you're working at your small group. So this is one of those reasons why a couple of minutes ago I talked about the importance of having a weekly bucket of every single ELA resource you need, so that when it's time to make these buckets or folders for each day, all of your material is right there in that bucket and you can just kind of sort it out from there. So it's very important to train your kids to know where to look. Some teachers may have buckets on shelves. I know it's easier for math because the teacher might say, okay, go get the bucket of Judy clocks, and the kids will find where to go get those hands-on clocks. ELA is a little bit different because there's more content to cover, so there's going to be a lot more spiraling different materials than like your math manipulative buckets. So just have a structure in place where the students are going to know where their materials are going to be and how to get them. And if your kids are at a reading level where they can read independently, put some directions in there. If your kids are not at a reading level or an independent reading level, maybe put like little images in there for them to know what they need to do first, what they need to do second, and third. And then it's going to be time to actually organize your students themselves. We talked about questions to ask yourself, and one of those questions was, where are your kids physically going to be in the classroom? Are they going to be on the floor? Are they going to be in desks? Are they going to be on the carpet? And I know the first probably a couple months of school, it's going to look different this year because of COVID. You're probably not going to be allowed to let your students roam the classroom. They're probably going to be in their desks or at tables. I'm not sure. I can't speak to that yet, but just assuming how things are going at this point, your group work is probably going to be a little different for those first couple weeks. I don't know, but in a normal situation, in a normal world, without this virus taking over, you might have your students in different pods around the classroom doing their different activities. Or if you do flexible seating, they can pick where they want. I do suggest making a bulletin board for the students to know where to go at each round. So there's two ways, and you can't really see them close up here, but there's two ways to keep visuals for the students. You can do them digitally and project them on your whiteboard, or you can make like a bulletin board that has the places that each of the students are going to go. If you don't want to have a bulletin board and you'd rather have like a digital PowerPoint presentation, that would be fantastic as long as you don't need your whiteboard for any of your centers. So if you need your smart board for like a hands-on technology center during that, I would not suggest doing that. But if you don't need it, you can display it. And that if you've got students who are in speech classes or students who might need like if they're going to like a pull-out intervention group, they can come back into the classroom, ask a teammate, hey, what round are we in right now? They'll say we're in round 4. They can look at the board and they'll know exactly where to go. And honestly, after like 2 months of doing these groups, the students are a lot better at knowing where they're supposed to go than the teachers are. So they can kind of run that small group and that grouping a lot better than the teachers. So you'll be very surprised. The last thing we're going to talk about is organizing differentiation. One thing I do suggest for small group differentiation and keeping those materials organized is to color code everything. So if you've got 5 different groups in your class and they're all 5 different levels of reading, I would suggest having them all color coded. And that would be maybe one group is red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Last year, my niece, I volunteered in her class a lot. Her teacher grouped by like popular characters of books, and there was like, she was always in the Skippy John Jones class. I think there was a Pete the Cat group. There was a No David group. So that would be another cute idea. But as long as you group your students into groups that are easy for them to remember, then you can start sorting your materials. And that's like that bucket I talked about at the beginning of each week, is when you grab your bucket and you start filling it with all of your stuff for the week, you'll be able to have folders like these. And if you have folders like these, you can have a red, yellow, green, blue, purple, if you go with those 5 colors. And then you'll put all the material for each group in that folder so that when it is time for Wednesday's small group, you can pull out Wednesday's green folder and have all the material in there. One thing I had behind me when I was at my little kidney bean table, I always had those stackable drawers, and I would have a red drawer, an orange drawer, a green drawer, a blue drawer, and a purple drawer. And whenever, like, I would keep their leveled readers in there for the week, I would keep their chapter books in there for the week. They would do interactive notebooks, so I would have pre-cut interactive notebook pieces for them. In my red and my orange groups, I would keep things that would help separate their text a little bit, because they needed a little bit more scaffolded approaches to reading. So I would have like witch fingers and those color strip bars. So anything specific your kids would need, I would have in those drawers. And then I would like Post-it note what we did on each day. And there's actually a freebie in that blog post. There is a 30-page freebie. And within that 30-page freebie, if you sign up for my email list, it will be emailed directly to your inbox. But in that 30-page download, there is a small group tracker where you can keep up with what you taught in red group, what you taught in yellow group, what you taught in blue group. So that is included in that download. So click that link that I just dropped in the comments, and you can scroll through it and read what we just talked about, and then you can sign up for that at the end. That is all of the content that we are going to cover today. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Bye-bye.